What's a deep Tu B'Shvat nigga? What's it like a deep one? A deep Tu B'Shvat nigga. We gotta figure something out. No? What's it like a deep Eretz Yisrael nigga?
Any Uman song.
What's that?
Any Uman song.
Any Uman song?
One of the old American Jewish songs.
I don't know. Okay, we gotta sing one more nigga. Ay da da da, ay da 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 da, da 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 da, ay da da da, ay da 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 da, ay da da da, ay da 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 da, da 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 da, ay da da da. Nachon. Charles was saying that last night to Mincha and Meir. Nachon. A lot of tefillas today, but wait, before I forget, the whole month, the Shvat, dedicated by the Jeromes, Leilun Nishmat Sarah Lev Bas Yechiel, David's grandmother, Joni and Moshe Pollack, Leilun Nishmat Moshe's grandparents, Shimon ben Moshe, Tzvi ben Mordechai, and Leilun Nishmat Shira Rachma, Bas Harav Alter Nasen Nata, whose yahrzeit is tomorrow night. The Eagles, Lichvod, all the Eagle birthdays of this month. Anonymous, Lichvod Kilat Shirat David. This week, by Stephanie and Charles Sakal, Lichvod Simon's birthday, Arichut Yamim Ad 120 Bezrat Hashem. Shira and Argon Tavnik, Leilun Nishmat Shira's grandfather, Daniel Moshe ben Chaim, Mordechai and Rachel Welk, Leilun Nishmat Avram Gershon ben Yaakov Yosef Halevi, whose yahrzeit is Shabbos, Esther and Shimon Parnas, Leilun Nishmat Phyllis ben Ezra, Pnina Perel Bas Yisrael Berivka, and in honor of the birth of a granddaughter. And today, specifically, our shir is for the refuah of
Avram
Tzvi ben Chana Gittel,
who's having spinal surgery today in Chutz La'aretz.
I should have it. Be'ezrat Hashem, it should be with Nisim and Niflot.
Amen.
B'yut Tova, l'chaim, 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 l'chaim Eretz Yisrael, l'chaim Chaverim Yikarnim, l'chaim Peirot Haaretz, l'chaim our children who are growing up eating the fruit of Eretz Yisrael. Wow, that's what's going into their
Literally
system.
and figuratively.
Both literally and figuratively. L'chaim, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Amen. All right, brothers, we're going to do something short and very, very sweet. And we're going to talk about Purim. Because it's Tu B'Shvat, right? We'll see. We'll see what's going on. Okay. Let's see this piece. Okay. Well, and also the shvi, which is the shvis?
I think the harmonics.
The Hermon has to be, yeah? It's, I see. And if anyone can get it out, it's Binyamin, actually. Last drop. Opa, bidiuk. Okay. I saw this minhag in Breslov a few years ago, and it changed my Purim, but it also changed my Tu B'Shvat. It changed the whole period before Purim. Everyone wants to show up ready on Purim because on the day itself of Purim you have to just be there. Without too many machshavas of besides the 4 mitzvahs of the Yom, which you have a chiyuv to do, Mikra Megillah, Matanas Lavyonim, Mishloach Manot, and Seudas Mitzvah. But besides that, there's an avoda of the day of Purim, an avoda on the day of Purim that is so intense that requires a long time of hachana, of a preparation, a long time for it. So look at the following. This is what they did. I've heard people do. I'm sure you have too. Hatzileni miklipas Haman Amalek zakeni likdushas Mordechai ve'Esther. This lashon, save me from the klipa of Haman Amalek, and merit me for the holiness of Mordechai ve'Esther. Now this is basically taken from one of the Breslov Mashpim, and he's going to develop this concept of what's the story with this and mazik kashur to Tu B'Shvat. הזעקה המהדהדת זה קרוב ל-200 שנה בעיירות נמרוב, ברסלב, תפליק, טולצ'ין, צפת, בני ברק, נתיבות, ירושלים, אפרת. He's saying, I can see you're not looking in, boys.
You added that.
Ah, you're a very observant Jew. Nachon. This is a za'aka, this is a scream that you could hear wherever Breslovers live. You hear this scream going in the air. And he listed the names of places, many of them, this is back in Ukraine. We've been to a few of these towns, and also here in Eretz HaKodesh. Halokach limerton moreno Reb Nosson. This is what Reb Nosson said. Kol hazoek laHashem 40 yom lifnei Purim, sheyatzileu miklipas Haman Amalek, veyizakeu likdushas Mordechai ve'Esther, yizke liros es pnei Mordechai hatzadik be'es kriyas HaMegillah.
Yeah, we missed it.
Not too late. That's the point. Is that even if I take today as if like I can mashlim, like I do tashlumim somehow, right? However many days we have, screaming for 40 days before. Now we're already in, obviously, which is crazy to think about this, right? We're already in the Zman where it's like, now the days are to scream about this inyan of please Hashem, save me from the klipa of Haman and Amalek. And this last Shabbos, we started that avoda b'foyal, because of reading at the end of Parashas B'Shalach, right? And to merit me for the Kedusha of Mordechai and Esther, he says that you basically will see, and here he added in parentheses, lahasig et Kedusha. So what does it mean to see Mordechai Yehudi when we read Mordechai Yehudi? Is that the Kedusha is so tangible, like as if you're seeing the panim of Mordechai Yehudi when you're reading the Kriyas Megillah.
Also, like the whole part of Shovavim also?
I'm sure. I mean, it's the part of Tikkun HaNefesh in general, but I hear what you're saying about Dafka, these weeks of doing it. Dvarav elu asu ve'osim perot. I love how they tie this in together. This statement, this approach, this direction, this mahalach of living now towards Purim, Baruch Hashem, we've been so busy that we didn't have time to really start on time, but this now, we're marching towards Purim. The headquarters of marching towards Purim for us will be from right now. Why? Because this way of thinking and this way of acting and this way of dreaming, it's fruitful. It has its fruition. It has bliss. It has shefa. הם מלהיבים את לבבותיהם של אלפים מבני ישראל ודוחפים אותנו לנצל את תקופת טרום פורים בזעקות גדולות ומרות כמרדכי הצדיק בשעתו ובכך למשוך על עצמם את הערת הניסים והנפלאות כבימים ההם בזמן הזה. It's pretty simple what he's saying over here. This way, if you wake up every morning, right from now on until Purim, and every day, and maybe a few times a day, you just scream this out. What this does is you become a roaring lion. Now, I see this in shul, I see it in yeshivas. Always around this time, it's kind of the snooze button is on. It's just like this because the calendar, the way that it works, is that we're ishtikel shlufing. It's okay, Rav Arush is coming next week. Don't worry, we're going to wake up. Those bar mitzvah woke us up. We have nekudot of waking us up, but because of the natural way of how the calendar is, and Rosh Hashanah was so far, Hanukkah was already so far, I can't even see Purim yet. I have to draw Purim closer to me. I have to draw it in. He says when a Yid approaches now this mahalach towards Purim, and every single day he's saying Atzileni nam b'klipas Haman Amalek zakeni l'kedushas Mordechai ve'Esther. This has fruit. This does something to us. Yom Chamisha Asar B'Shvat omed b'Parashat Adrachim. Tu B'Shvat, the 15th of the day of the month of Tu B'Shvat, is basically, how do you say Parashat Drachim? It's a crossroads. It's a crossroads. Umachriz bekol, the Tu B'Shvat actually proclaims, Yemei Purim mitkarvim. No, that's not how we grew up thinking about Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat was Karen Kayemet. It was just, what do you call it, JNF? Is that what it's called, right? It was not Purim, right? But Be'emet, in the pnimiyut of it, and he's going to tie this in to show Ma Kesher Tu B'Shvat in Purim, but Ma Kesher, the avodah that we mentioned in the beginning over here, what we have to do now, Tachlis Chevra, what we have to involve ourselves in doing to be more this. Look what he says. This day, Yom Chamisha Asar B'Shvat, Omed B'Parashat Drachim, it's at a crossroads, Umachriz B'Kol, She'yemei Purim Mitkarvim. Basically, Tu B'Shvat is really screaming, Purim is coming. Now, what does that mean? Be'od pachot michodesh yachulu yemei Purim. Less than a month already, obviously. How long is Purim from now? 3 weeks?
29 days? It's
4? Yudalid?
It's 2, so it's 1 day less than a month.
Shom'im ha'mevinim et lichishato ha'ro'emet. Those that understand can hear the thundering whisper. I love that. Rabbi Nachman has a lashon like this. What is Rabbi Nachman's lashon?
Silent scream.
Ze'akat hadmama, right? Thundering whisper, silent scream. וגם אם לא נקראת לבוא אל המלך זה 30 יום, חושע לדפוק על דלתי רחמים. And even if you haven't been summoned for 30 days, like the Megillah says, וזה לא נקראתי לבוא אל המלך 30 יום, you feel like you haven't been called in, you come and you start banging on that door of mercy and saying, I'm not waiting for an invitation, I'm banging on the door of mercy already now. יום 15 בשבט הוא יום בו עולה השרף באילנות. What's the saraf? Sap. הם מתחילים שנה חדשה. There is a hitchadshut, but as opposed to Rosh Hashanah, or as opposed to other times that it's the beginning of the month, or it's more visual, it's more clear. What does it mean that the sap begins is completely concealed, it is completely unseen? These are things that we're not aware of, but inside the neshama of a yid, this is the same thing that's happening. New Year is beginning, גם עם כלפי חוץ, even if outside, החורף בעיצומו, and we're going to see it in the next 2 days. It's going to get pretty gnarly here. Everyone should be warm and healthy and safe, בעזרת השם. ועדיין שקועים העצים בשנתם העמוקה, שינתם העמוקה, and it seems the trees and the whole world of vegetation and the whole world of, the outside nature, it seems like it's schluffing. He says, באמת הרי עמוק בתוך הגזע מתרחש שינוי ומתחוללת התחדשות. Deep within the root, an amazing, intense change and transformation is beginning to take place. Reb Shlomo used to teach quite often the following teaching from Reb Leibel Eger around Tu B'Shvat, when it's always around B'Shalach. He said, if you would interview a Jew a second before the sea would split, remember this teaching? If you would interview a Jew a second before the sea split, and you'd ask him, what do you think about who you've become, right? What do you think about what kind of person you've become by now, right? He had a few ways of saying this. So what would the Jew say about himself a second before Kriyas Yam Suf? If you would ask him, what would you say? What do you think about yourself? How have you evolved? How have you what's been your transformation this last kufa? What would he say? What do you think about himself? Yeah, already not yet. The Mitzrayim Rodef Achareim, the Egyptians are right behind you. Doomsday. What are you talking about? Change? It's still.
Very confused.
Yeah. Is anything happening inside of you? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just trying to, make it through the day, right? But really, a second, and then you ask that same yid a second afterwards, and you say, "Wow, look who you become. You're walking in the water." Reb Shlomo says, "But where did that hitchadshut begin? You think it began when it was visible to everybody? Ma pitom. The greatest changes in life, the spark of it happens when no one knows about it and no one can see it. Now, this happens to us quite often in our Yiddishkeit. How do you know if you've really grown, if you've really been turned on for real? If you have no innate need to tell anybody how much you're flying. If your gut is to let people know you're not going to believe what I'm feeling, it means that the itchadshut is happening on the outside. And it really comes on strong. It's when your hitchadshut, when your renewal is taking place like in the shorish of the geza, like deep down inside where no one can see it. In fact, there's a beautiful teaching from Reb Nachman on this. Reb Shlomo said his name is Reb Nachman. I asked Reb Chaim Kramer many times over the years to where is it inside? He said it isn't. So I'm a little bit conflicted because I heard Reb Shlomo say his name is Reb Nachman, but Reb Chaim Kramer is Reb Chaim Kramer. So maybe he meant Reb Nachman of the Gemara, or I don't know what he meant, right? But he said like this. It's like funny. My friend Rav Raz Hartman, when he went to hear Reb Shlomo for the first time in Los Angeles, he said the whole night he kept on hearing Reb Shlomo saying all these teachings from Rabbi Nachman, and he said he couldn't believe that Rav Nachman from the Gemara said all these chidushim. He just wasn't aware that it was no right. So he said like this: when you do something beautiful, or God grants you the great opportunity to do something special, and you don't tell anybody, and it's a secret between you and Hashem, it makes you so beautiful, right? But the second, that's beauty, that's real beauty. But the second that you tell someone, you have the need to tell someone what you did, he says at that moment it's like you threw it up out of you, you vomited it out of you, and that you lose that innate beauty. So he said like this, we have a pasuk in Tehillim, we say it Friday night, Oz v'tiferet b'mikdasho. You need oz, you need strength to over your beauty, to not let it go out. And when you have strength to not let out all the beautiful things that you've been privileged to do, where does that end up? B'mikdasho. That's how you build the base on Mikdash.
The concept of tzniut.
Mamash. Tzniut l'chet im Hashem Elokecha. The beauty of Tu B'Shvat is so deep that Hashem doesn't even let us know about it so that we don't lose it. You hear? It is taking place, the hitchadshut and the hitlavut is taking place in a place that is ne'elam me'enei kol adam, that no one knows about. It is so deep that you don't even know about it because Hashem Yisbarach doesn't want us to have the, bemet. That's why like people don't walk around and be, oh my God, gefalt, like Tu B'Shvat was. It's getting more and more popular, which also makes me a little bit nervous because they'll start talking about how beautiful and high Tu B'Shvat was. But on a pnimi level, the nikudav hitchadshut is taking place so deep inside that no one even knows about it because it's preparing ourselves for something very, very, very important, which in this context is the Kedusha of Purim, which will continue to develop. You can't see it. Nalash. You saw that Levana they caught in America? They could see it. Okay. Mamash kmo Purim. Now we quote Likutei Halachos. Ki ze ikar hanes hanifla shel Purim. What is the wondrous miracle of Purim? She'af al pi she'adayin lo nisbat el malchus harisha. That even though the malchus, the evil kingdom, wasn't nullified yet, it wasn't over yet, which is the bechin of malchus achashverosh, ve'akasi avdei achashverosh anan, and we're still avadim of achashverosh. Af al pi chen, nonetheless, chamal aleinu Hashem yitbarach be'otzem noreotav. God had tremendous compassion on us. ועשה לנו נס נורא כזה שגדול מכל הניסים, שבזה אנו רואים עוצם חסדו וחמלתו עדיין עלינו בכל דור, אפילו בגלות הארוך הזה. What is he saying? Tell me something. When we think about the great miracle of Purim, what about the great miracle of Purim is so great? What part of the story is so great? What piece of the story is like the greatest part of the story for us? The miracle, it's not a trick question. V'na'afochu, זאת אומרת that we weren't killed. That's a nice thing, right? It's a pretty nice thing. It wasn't a trick question. It was like, we weren't killed, l'chaim, right? But what mitziyut were we still living under? A gzeira. It's a neis nista, b'diuk.
The whole Megillah is nista.
Nachon. But I'm saying that mitziyut, like we celebrate Purim, this holiday, but back then, the time of Shushan, when was Layehudim, Vayi Shushan Tzala V'Samecha? Like when was the Simcha really on?
When they got rid of Zera.
What do we commemorate? The Ma'achov, like not being killed. So what Reb Nosson is saying over here, the story of Purim shows us what the real Hitchadshut is all about. That it's still dark outside, especially now. I mean, I don't know how you tell over these tires in Sydney, or in Melbourne, or in Argentina when it's summertime right now. But usually in most of the world, they're... What's it? B'diuk. So it's irrelevant. So we're in a state of that on the outside. Okay, we're dancing, everything. It's pretty crazy. My Dut Shemesh just broke. Meaning, like there's crazy stuff going on, right? Hashem Yerachim, was craziness this morning. I don't know if any of you felt it. I didn't feel it, but it's crazy stuff going on in the world with earthquakes and Mishigasim. And
I was very happy to be a little bit overweight this morning.
Good Purim. If you look, this is a crazy thing. It's never happened before like this. You know what a bolan is?
Yes. Sinkhole.
Do you know how many sinkholes have just been popping up throughout Eretz Yisrael the last few months? My mom is right around the corner from my parents in Ranana. Just yesterday, another one, just out of the blue. A bolan, massive bolan right out there. It doesn't seem that, things are calming down, it's all getting smooth. It seems that things are still meshuggah. But within all that, there's nisim nistar. Within all of this craziness, Be'emet, there are these things. And Tu B'Shvat resembles that big time. Reb David, Keren HaYesod and Achuza.
Wow.
Yeah, I forgot, you're from Menachon. Right there. Right there. My parents, you know my parents are. And I've seen that, yeah.
It's hard to see that.
Mamash, it's crazy.
The nace is that no one got hurt.
Nisim are crazy Nisim. So he says like this. Look at the third to bottom paragraph. Gami makol radum. Even if everything is shlufing. Gami mezag ha'avir ha'ruchani u'chorpi, arpili v'kar. Even if the spiritual temperature is very cold. Gam az efshar li'itchadesh v'litzmoach michadash. You see, that's what we were saying before, is that spiritually the temperature is not warm and fiery like Yantiv or Hanukkah even. This time of the year, even spiritually, that's what I was trying to say before, even spiritually it's cold. It's cold. Saying, but that's the whole Indian, is that Dafka, this Indian of Tu B'Shvat, is now in this time when you can't see it and when you're not feeling it. Emunah is, this is mamish happening. Lo lechinam Yom Tu B'Shvat hu Yom Holadeto shel Reb Nosson. Happy birthday, Rabbi Natan. Today's his birthday. Reb Nosson was born on Tu B'Shvat. Did Chaim mention it this morning? Sasha? Yeah, it's Reb Nosson's birthday. לא לחינם יום ט"ו בשבט הוא יום הולדתו של רבי נתן. כי אכן הוא זה שמעביר את המסר הזה. Who gave over what we said better than Rabbi Natan? This was his life. הוא זה שלוחם עם סברותיו הארסינות של Amalek. He's the one that's constantly looking at the eye of Amalek and says, you have nothing on me. כאשר נראה ונודע לכל מביט ומסתכל בספריו הקדושים. This is a quote from a Breslover Tzadik, Reb Avram Sternhartz, about Reb Nosson. When you look at his Sfarim, even though he speaks about all different types of attributes and character refinement traits וכולי, אבל עיקר ברוב דבריו יסובבו על עניין ההתחזקות. I knew a friend that said, listen, I stopped learning Likutei Halachos. He said, why? He said, basically, after like 3 years, I realized he's basically saying the same exact thing every single day. And I said, well, how's your Yiddishkeit doing? He's like, bro, it's so rough right now. I'm not doing so. I'm like, well, you should have stayed in Shir. Exactly. Like what Reb Nosson's speaking about, what we need the most. It's all around hitchazkut, about strengthening ourselves in the shorish. Really, I heard this from Rav Weinberger also one time, and I felt so much better. He said, one time on Lag Bomer, he said, you ever like just admit it that like after all these svarim that we're learning everything, basically it seems like everyone's just saying the same exact thing all the time. Like if you really look at it, like at the end of the day, you could say it's a sefer on this, a sefer on that, this tikkun, this midah. At the end of the day, everyone's more or less just really saying the same thing. Reb Nosson was the master of this, and yet he wrote about everything. But it was all sviv, the most important nekudah, which is, like he says over here, sviv inyan heitchaskut, lechazek uleametz, to strengthen kol ha-necheshalim ve'ha'ayefim ve'hayegeim. Who does Amalek attack?
The weak.
The schleppers, the ones that are tired, ha-necheshalim acharecha. That's who he goes after. Asher Amalek rodef acharem leval yitiashu atzmam min harachmim. So that we don't despair from having mercy upon ourselves. הוא זה שעוסק לגלות, לפרסם ולהאיר את הארץ מרדכי צדיק האמס. Basically, Reb Nosson spent his life to make great the light of the Tzadik HaEmes, the Bechina of Mordechai. וכל סיפוריו וכל שיחותיו וסיפוריו וענייניו, anything he spoke about. הכל היה סובב והולך רק על כותב עניין זה. It's really, I'm not trying to חלילה dissuade anyone from learning להפך. It's how much we needed. He knew what the Nekuda would be before Mashiach. That's really what that's what we're going to need. להודיע ולפרסם גדולת קדושת מעלת רבינו זכר צדיק לברכה וגדולת קדושת מעלת מאמרי תורותיו הקדושים ושיחותיו וסיפורי מעשיותיו וכל ענייניו להודיע לבני אדם גבולותיו להפיץ מעיינותיו חוצה. The way that Reb Nosson felt so strongly is that if he was in the time of Mordechai, he would have been Mordechai's scribe. But he felt that the Tzadik HaEmes obviously was Rabbeinu Zal in his time, which is still in a very pashut way. That's why it sounds so pashut, because it's kilu sovev achrei hakol. Because when you want to get to the shorish of something, the point has to be hammered home. And there's no yid that I know that I would ever want to hang out with for too long that said he has enough emunah and chizuk talk in his life. I'm good with that. I'm connected enough in my shorish, now I could just hang out on the outside. Right? Mapiton. Tu B'Shvat is that day of shorish. Kidaika. I think this is a quote from Likutei Halachos. Kidaika hatalmid shel Tzadik HaEmes. It's dafka the student of the Tzadik HaEmes. Hu yesh lo koach lilachem ba'Amalek. He has a koach to fail Amalek. שרוצה להעלים ולהסתיר שם הצדיק הזה. Amalek always wants you to forget your inspiration. He wants you to forget your Rebbe. Because if you forget your Rebbe and if you forget your inspiration, it's easier to get tired. No pun intended, as usual. Good Purim. It's easier to forget when you forget your Rebbe, when you forget your inspiration, when you forget what brought you to your Shoresh, the result is inside. An inside yawn, an inner epic yawn. Okay? And Amalek's like, got him. But so the Talmud of the Tzadik is saying to Amalek, there's no way that you're going to have our Tzadik, our Rebbe's name forgotten from the world. That's what he says over here. Ki bechinas Yoshua v'Talmid. This is the bechin of Yoshua Talmido. כל עסקו וכל תחבלותיו לפרסם ולהגדיל שמו הקדוש והנורא של הצדיק הזה בעולם. If you look through Sefer Yoshua, whenever it seems that it was getting rough with the milchamot that Am Yisrael were going through, those first like 6 or 7 prakim, or even more, like 10 prakim, it's very intense. What happens when it seems that it gets a little bit shaky? The Navi, it's always brought down the Navi, either Chazak ve'ematz, or they'll just quote a few psukim of and Moshe, this is what Moshe said, or this is what Hashem said to Moshe. Mamash, the same exact nekuda. Now, what he's also alluding to is, who did Moshe Rabbeinu send to fight Amalek in the end of this last Shabbos? Like we learned, he sent Yoshua. He sent the Talmud to go and fight Amalek. Because what is Reb Nosson saying, basically? And now it makes sense. It says, Moshe Rabbeinu knew that as much as he may fight Amalek, and maybe he could win or not, what he's trying to do is be manchil, the Masorah, into Am Yisrael. And manchil, the Masorah, to have us inherit the Masorah of Am Yisrael is like this. How much are you going to fight for the covet of your Rav? How much are you going to fight for the covet of your Rav? What is Amalek trying to do? It's trying to basically eliminate the beauty, the kedusha, the koach of the Besorah that Moshe Rabbeinu brought to the world. So what does Moshe Rabbeinu tell Yeshua? I see you. I see you. You'd go through fire and water for me, not in a chalila, God forbid, a gaivadik way. I see what you're like. I see you. I see you, the leader. Yeah, I see it already in you. Say lachem ba'amalek. Go and fight Amalek. And like we learned last week, Moshe Rabbeinu was the Ramban. Remember that amazing Ramban that we learned? That Moshe Rabbeinu went up to the top of the Givah, so that while he's davening, he's looking at Hashem's kinderlach, and it'll intensify his tefillah. And while we're fighting, we'll see the Tzadik Emes davening on the head of the Givah, and that's going to intensify our fight as well. And then it becomes clear to us, this enemy is trying to weaken us by making us forget our inspiration. Anytime, personally in my life, when I've thought it's time to graduate spiritually, it's been the worst times of my life. The worst. And I'm thinking, no, this is like the spiritual evolvement. So I have to say thank you, that was for then. Now it's time to move on. It's mamash Amalek. Now, you have to always grow, and that's what I'm talking about. What I mean is forgetting the source of your inspiration. Forgetting the source of your inspiration. I'm just saying, I don't know how it's been, but if anyone else experienced it, by me, it's always come to hit me really hard afterwards. That's Amalek, right then and there, saying, that was cute, that was sweet, that was kindergarten. You're a much more evolved person now. That's the voice of Amalek also. You don't need the Aleph Bet. Listen, I'm saying a lot of Reb Shlomo stuff these days. I don't know why it's really in me, but I got to tell you one more thing. Because this really, a few years ago, I published this video, and I don't know how many people really hopped in. But the last summer of his life, when he was in Yakar, in Yerushalayim, someone in the crowd, and if you look closely, it's actually someone that became a very famous singer about 10 years ago, Yehuda Green. You've heard of Yehuda Green? Mm-hmm. So he's sitting in the crowd, and he says, I want to ask you a question. I'll send this to you, Chaver, if you want to see. I'll send it. It's one of the most important 5 minutes that YouTube for sure ever was zochet to. But someone asked him, Yehuda asked him, how do you feel about those that became too frum for you? They used to Mekarev. You brought them into Yiddishkeit, and then it's Ki'ilu. They look at you, and it's like they give you gefilte fish handshakes. They're like, oh, that was cute. That was baby, right? And he looked at him and he said, I'll tell you an amazing story. He said he had a friend who was in Russia. He was I think he was like a top surgeon in Russia, made Aliyah, And then here he couldn't barely get a job. He became a chovesh in Mada. Not that it's not important, but he became a chovesh. A paramedic. So this Russian doctor he was a paramedic, he said to Reb Shlomo, one day I got a call to come to a family that was all suffering from horrible food poisoning. And he had to pump out the stomachs of this whole family. It was basically like, I think like it was like a 3-day yontiv. They were eating things, whatever, and the whole family got sick, and he's pumping out the poison. So the paramedic said, as the last person I was working on, I looked at her, and she was such a beautiful woman. But I was like, what am I, crazy? I stick to the job just to save her life right now. This is crazy, but he was so taken by her. But he obviously he wasn't going to ask her for her number after he's, So, okay, I don't know, whatever. He says 2 days later, he's standing in Bank Leumi in Rechavia, and he's waiting to go to the teller, and there's a person in front of him, and the person finishes with the teller, turns around, it's this woman. He thinks, oh my God, wow. So she's starting to walk back, and he goes up to her, he says, Shalom, and she takes one look at him, and she basically gets nauseous and runs out of the bank, okay? So he said, this paramedic said, do you understand? She identifies me with the poison that I pumped out of her. He says, I took these Yidden, and I pumped out their goyish stomachs. That's what he said. But they identify me with the poison that I pumped out of them. I found that to be. I was crying my eyes out when I saw. I was crying. I was crying because that's what I'm saying before about those sources of inspiration really pumped out poison from us. But it's too painful sometimes to stay there because it reminds us of who we were.
Which we can't do.
So Amalek comes and he's like, yeah, it's time to graduate now. That was kindergarten. And Yeshua is there and he's saying, don't you dare do that. You're gonna tear us from the shorish of our itchadshut. And we're gonna get so tired if we do that. So basically Reb Nosson's life was dedicated. I'm sure there were people all the time, Rabbi Nachman, that after they were by the Rebbe, and the Rebbe turned their life over completely. And I'm sure this is by a lot of people. And I'm sure they said it's time to move on, whatever, chule v'chule. For sure it's like this. It sounds like they're saying the same thing all the time. With Reb Shlomo, of course, it always sounds like he's saying the same thing, gewalt, sweet, all these words. They're pumping out our goyish stomachs. So Tu B'Shvat is the day of going back to what pumped out the initial poison and appreciating it to high heavens and realize how much our life and our itchachut is dependent on being kashur to the shorish of it. And he says, Zeh Azman, the last line here, Zeh Azman le'alot tasarav ba'ilan. Now's the time to elevate the sap that's in the tree, that's coming out of the tree. L'itchadesh belimud sfarav shel Rabbeinu, obviously this is a Breslover piece, so he's saying, L'itchadesh belimud sfarav shel Rabbeinu HaKadosh v'tamidor Reb Nosson, v'latzet bi'ikvotem ha'ye'ara, take the inspiration you get from the Sfarim of the Tzadikim, go out and run to the field and just keep on screaming, Abba, Aye, the whole thing again, but this time with so much more appreciation of being connected to our shoresh, and that's what we need more than anything. As much as we always think, I need something new. No, I need to be reconnected to the shoresh of my neshama in a new way. But I don't need a new shoresh neshama. I only have one. I only have one shoresh neshama. So anyway, it should be a schus for us to go back to the basics again and to appreciate them. Mamash, the basics of all basics. To find a new way of screaming out when the whole world is shlufing, and the whole world, the spiritual world, the physical world, it's kivyachol all radum, and dafka today, to go into the shorish of it, and find a new way to talk to Hashem and scream to Hashem, as with utmost appreciation for all the malachim that He sent us along our way. Good yantiv, everyone.